Just 5 days. I should be feeling excitement, joy, anticipation, but all I can feel is this suffocating weight pressing down on my chest. My wedding should be the happiest moment of my life, but instead, it's just a countdown to disaster. A disaster I never saw coming. My father, the man who raised me single-handedly after my mother passed away when I was 16, has decided that my sister's trip to scatter her cat's ashes is more important than walking me down the aisle. His daughter. The one who's been patiently waiting for this day, the one who stood by his side through all the ups and downs, trying to convince herself that he was her hero. But now, he's chosen her again. Chosen Katie. It's not like I wasn't used to being in second place. My whole life felt like it was spent chasing after his attention, but Katie was always the one who managed to slip through the cracks of my father's judgment, like a ghost always getting the benefit of the doubt. The fragile, sickly little sister who would never, ever have to lift a finger because, according to Dad, she was too delicate for hard work. The years I spent running around, doing everything she didn't want to do, all while she lounged in her room with some imaginary illness or another, might have been annoying, but I accepted it. I had no choice. But that was then, when we were kids. I thought once I left for college, once I started building my life, things would change. It did, for a while. No more walking on eggshells around my sister, no more feeling like I had to fight for attention that should have been mine. But that wasn't the end of the story. No, after years of silence and distance, here we are again, my father choosing her over me. Katie's life has been a mess since she dropped out of her job to start a jewelry business that was doomed before it even started. Now, she's back with my dad, unemployed, living off him, and refusing to take responsibility for any of it. Every time I try to talk to him about it, it's the same: give her time. She needs time. Time for what, exactly? To whine and wallow in self-pity while he carries the weight of her failures on his shoulders? It's maddening. Infuriating. I met Andy in college. We've been together for 8 years, and now, after all this time, we're finally tying the knot. Everything was supposed to be perfect, until Katie's mess came barging back into our lives. And my father, the man who should have been standing beside me, preparing to walk me down the aisle like he promised, has now chosen to be with her instead. Because Katie's cat died. I can almost hear him now, trying to justify it. She's just struggling so much. She's been through so much grief, you have to understand. The same excuses, the same tired lines. I'm supposed to understand? I can't even find it in myself to be sympathetic anymore. Yes, I get it, losing a pet is painful. But this is manipulative. Katie's been using every misfortune in her life to keep my dad wrapped around her finger, and now it's my wedding she's using as her excuse. And then, when I thought things couldn't get worse, Dad called me just a few days ago. His voice was tight, his words slow, as though he was holding something back, trying to soften the blow. I'm sorry, honey, but I can't walk you down the aisle. Katie, she's really struggling right now. She needs me. His words rang in my ears, like a hammer to my heart. She needs me. Not you. She needs me. That was the twist. That was the gut punch. The reality set in. He wasn't even considering how I felt in all this. The daughter who had been waiting for this moment her whole life was being shoved aside once again, like an afterthought. His words hung in the air, and I swear, for a moment, I thought I might just shatter into a million pieces. I can't believe this is happening, I muttered, staring out the window, my fingers trembling as they clutched the phone. Dad, this is my wedding. My day. You're my father. The words felt hollow in my mouth, a desperate plea that went unanswered. I couldn't stop the tears, but I couldn't let them fall either. Not in front of him. He tried to justify himself again. He always does. You'll understand when you're a parent, honey. I didn't even know how to respond. How do you explain to someone who's made so many selfish choices that this is one thing that I needed? One thing where I wanted to be seen, to be prioritized. But no, once again, it's Katie who comes first. I was at the breaking point, but I didn't know how to fix this. I wanted to scream, to tell him how much this hurt, how deeply I felt abandoned. But I didn't. Instead, I just listened to the silent stretch between us, growing thicker with each passing second. 2 days later. I've decided. I'm done. I'm cutting them both out of my life. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep being the second choice, the afterthought, while Katie gets all the attention. I deserve better than this. I deserve the father I thought I had. The one who would stand by me, who would proudly walk me down the aisle, not let me down on the biggest day of my life for a cat who was already gone. So, I'm done. The wedding is in 3 days, but I'm not asking for their approval anymore. No, if they want to stay in my life, they'll have to earn it. Because I won't keep sacrificing my happiness just to play second fiddle to someone who's never had to work for anything in her life. Katie may be daddy's little girl, but I'm done being the daughter who doesn't matter. I dialed my dad's number, my hand trembling as I pressed the phone to my ear. I had assumed that he would say yes immediately when I asked him to walk me down the aisle. After all, he was my father. But the phone call the day before my wedding turned everything upside down. I waited, heart racing, only to hear his voice crackling in hesitation. I need some time to think about it, he said. That was the first crack in the foundation of my expectations. Something didn't sit right with me, but I pushed it aside. Maybe he had something on his mind. Maybe it was a big decision for him too. But then, the next day, he called me again. I braced myself, expecting to hear his voice filled with excitement, ready to share in the happiness of the day. Instead, his words shattered everything. I can't, he said. I won't be able to walk you down the aisle. Katie needs me. Katie. My stepmother. The woman who'd made it clear time and time again that her needs always came before mine. My throat tightened as I forced myself to ask, why? What's going on? The explanation that followed was so out of left field, it took me a moment to even process it. Katie, well, a few weeks ago, she cremated her cat, he said, the words so casual, so out of place against the backdrop of my wedding day. She wants to go to Hawaii and scatter its ashes on the beach where she went with her friends a few years ago. The place means a lot to her. I blinked, confusion swirling in my mind. And that's more important than walking me down the aisle? It's the first time in weeks she's talked about doing something. She asked me to go with her for emotional support, he explained, his voice thick with guilt, as if this was the most reasonable request in the world. I stood there, the weight of his words settling like a stone in my chest. My wedding day, the most important day of my life, was nothing more than a footnote in his eyes, overshadowed by a dead cat's ashes and some distant memory in Hawaii. I can't believe this, I said, my voice breaking through the fog of disbelief. I thought you'd be there for me. For our day. I tried to stay calm, tried to reason with him, but he just kept talking about Katie's feelings, how she was going through a difficult phase and needed him more than I did. The anger surged, hot and furious, but I fought it down, unwilling to let him see how much he was breaking me. I suggested maybe a friend could go with Katie. Or that she could do it a day later. I needed at least one parent at my wedding, but no. He stood firm, the same tired excuses spilling out, each one more infuriating than the last. She's my priority right now. You'll be fine. You'll have plenty of people around you, he said, his tone defensive. I don't want to upset her any more than I already have. That was it. That final, cutting line. My hands were shaking as I pressed the phone harder against my ear, the pressure building in my chest like a storm about to break. She's been your priority for years, Dad. Every damn holiday, every birthday, it's always been her. I snapped, the words tearing from me like a dam breaking. And now, on my wedding day, you choose her over me? I'm not surprised. I never have been. I didn't give him a chance to respond. My vision blurred with tears, but I didn't care. I hung up, blocking him across every platform I could. I didn't want to hear his excuses anymore. I needed to do something. Something that would make him feel what I was feeling. When I told Andy, my fiancé, about it, I could see the sympathy in his eyes. He understood. But it didn't make the hurt go away. For 2 days, I cried, but then, something clicked. The anger, the betrayal, it fueled me. I had a plan. And it would sting. I thought about it for a while, trying to think of the one thing that would make him feel the way I felt. And then it hit me. I called my Uncle Ray. He was my dad's twin, and they'd been at odds for years. Their rivalry had been a running joke in our family, but it wasn't funny. It was ugly, toxic. But for the first time in a long while, I saw an opportunity to use that rivalry. Uncle Ray, I said, my voice low and deliberate. I want you to walk me down the aisle. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. What? Me? Are you serious? I almost laughed. His disbelief was tangible. But I pushed on, my voice steady. It'll upset Dad. I think he deserves it. He chuckled, darkly. Well, in that case, I'm in. And just like that, the plan was set. The next evening, I posted about it. About how thankful I was that my Uncle Ray was stepping up. I knew my father would see it. I knew it would hit him hard. Within hours, my phone rang. It was him. I cannot believe you would do this, he said, his voice raw, desperate. Not Uncle Ray. Anyone but him. I let him vent, knowing I was in control now. When he promised to change Katie's mind and begged me to let him walk me down the aisle, I shook my head, my heart hardening. You had your chance, Dad, I said, my voice ice cold. You blew it. He broke then. The tears in his voice were unmistakable. You're being petty, selfish. I'm just trying to help your sister through this. She's been through so much. You don't understand. I felt a pang of guilt, but it was fleeting. You chose her over me. Now, you're going to feel what it's like to be second best. By the end of the call, he was sobbing. And me? I just stared at my phone, numb, my heart beating painfully in my chest. Was I wrong? Maybe. Probably. But in that moment, it felt like the only thing I could do. The only way to make him understand how much he had hurt me. 2 days to go until the wedding. And you know what? I'm not going to let anyone ruin it anymore. I'm walking down the aisle alone. It's my moment, my choice. And in the end, I'll be the one who decides who stands beside me. I knew, deep down, that I was going to have to walk this path alone. My heart was heavy as I spoke to my uncle, the one person who still managed to make me laugh, even in the thick of this chaos. We had gotten the reaction we wanted from my dad, or at least the one I had been desperate for, but my uncle didn't seem bothered by it. He was fine with being just a guest, the way it was always meant to be. He'd never been eager to walk me down the aisle in the first place. I wanted to believe it didn't hurt, but it did. So much. I didn't speak to my father on the phone. I wasn't ready for another round of angry words or manipulation. No, I wrote him a message, as cold and final as I could make it. My fingers trembled, but I typed it anyway. If you want to attend the wedding, you're welcome. But you don't need to walk me down the aisle. And if you choose to go to Hawaii with Katie, you're free to do that, too. But understand, if you do, I'll be cutting you off for good. You've had enough chances to prove that I'm a priority, and you've failed me every time. My mind raced as I hit send. Would he care? Would he even respond? I had long ago stopped expecting apologies from him, but a small part of me, an old, foolish part, still hoped for it. But of course, nothing. Not even a reply. I spoke to Andy about it, and while I wanted his support, I needed him to tell me I wasn't crazy. That I was justified in this decision. It's the right call, he said quietly, his voice steady as always, trying to calm the storm inside me. With only days left to go, it's clear you can't keep waiting for him. And so, the finality of it hit me. I was getting married without him. And in that moment, I realized that no matter how much I wanted it to be different, I was going to have to let go of the idea of him being there for me. It was surreal, walking down the aisle yesterday. I'm married now. I still can't fully wrap my head around it, the weight of the engagement ring on my finger and the wedding band now nestled beside it. It feels real, and it feels right. But then, there's the gnawing emptiness, the one that settles in when I think about my father. So here's the update I promised you, and trust me, it's not a happy one. My father didn't show up. No surprise there, really. He chose to be in Hawaii with Katie, scattering the ashes of her dead cat. Her cat. That was what mattered more than my wedding. I know, some of you will say I should have been more understanding. I should have taken her depression seriously. But here's the thing, I do. Depression is horrible, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone, not even on Katie, who's honestly made my life hell in the past. But her actions weren't born from sadness, they were born from a need to compete with me. To always be the center of attention. She could have waited, but no, she had to do this on the day of my wedding, and she knew exactly what she was doing. As for my dad? Well, I guess I shouldn't be shocked anymore. He made his choice clear when he decided to text me after the ceremony, right when I was supposed to be basking in joy. He told me he was in Hawaii with Katie and that he needed to be there for her, that she was more emotionally dependent on him than I ever had been. And then, just to twist the knife, he added that my petty and immature behavior with my uncle had really put him off. Petty and immature? Honestly, I could have screamed. But the words that really hit home, the ones that made me sick to my stomach, were when he said that he needed space from me. That we should stay apart for a while. On my wedding day. I wanted to believe I didn't care anymore, but the reality of it stung like nothing else. My own father, making excuses, hiding behind his own guilt. If he had cared, even a little, he would have shown up. But no. He didn't. So, what did I do? I blocked him. Because I couldn't stand another second of the pathetic excuses he was offering. I blocked him and decided, right then, that I was done pretending he was going to change. If he had truly cared, he would have been there. The day went on, and somehow, in spite of everything, I felt a peace I hadn't known was possible. I was still angry, still hurt. But I was also, at last, free. Free from the years of trying to make him care, free from the toxic pull of Katie's manipulations. But then, as if to rub salt in the wound, he sent me one last message. It was long, full of guilt-tripping and accusations, and honestly, it only made me want to ignore him even more. He said I was being evil, that I was acting out of spite, and that Katie's loss was something I couldn't even begin to understand. He was sorry, but apparently, my happiness didn't matter nearly as much as Katie's. And then, just like that, he vanished again. I thought I would feel different, maybe some sense of satisfaction, but all I could feel was emptiness. My father gone. My sister lost in her own world. But me? I was standing there, a wife, with no one to share it with except for the man I love. And as much as I wanted to scream, as much as I wanted to fix things with him, I knew deep down that the only person I was responsible for now was me. So yeah, maybe it was petty. Maybe it was immature. But you know what? I've been the one who's had to fight for my place in this family my whole life. I've been the one who's been pushed aside. And I won't be that person anymore. So, what now? Now, I'm going to live my life. My life. I'm not asking for permission anymore. The moment the wedding was over, I felt a strange mix of relief and bitterness. The day should have been pure joy, yet I couldn't shake the heavy weight of my father and sister's absence. People inevitably asked about them. Where were they? Why weren't they there? At first, I considered brushing it off, pretending everything was fine. But that felt like a lie I couldn't bear to tell. So, I told them the truth, even though it felt raw and ugly. Dad chose to go to Hawaii with Katie to scatter the ashes of her cat. Instead of being here for me, I said flatly. The shock on their faces was almost satisfying, in a twisted way. Some of them were speechless, others chuckled, but it was the kind of laugh you make when you're uncomfortable and sad all at once. I thought about how everything had come to this. The whole family knew by now, and no one could deny the weight of it. My father had chosen a dead cat over his own daughter. It wasn't just a cat, it was the ultimate symbol of his failure as a father. Yet, in the midst of it all, the wedding was still my day. I walked down that aisle with my head held high. And in that moment, surrounded by the people who truly mattered, I realized that nothing was going to steal my joy. I was finally with the man I wanted to spend my life with, and that made everything else fade into the background. But, as much as I tried to savor the day, reality was always lurking just around the corner. A week after the wedding, it was already starting to feel like the fallout was coming. This time, it wasn't just my dad who would disappoint me. It was Katie. Of course, she couldn't leave things alone. I didn't block her, but I sure wanted to after what she sent me. The message buzzed into my phone, and I hesitated before opening it. I knew it would be bad, but I wasn't prepared for just how insufferable it would be. She said, "Hey, we just got back from Hawaii. Our relatives are all upset with us about the cat ashes thing on your wedding day. You've really made us look bad, you know? I wish you hadn't gone around telling people the story. I thought you understood what I'm going through. Losing a loved one is hard, and I thought you'd have more compassion. But clearly, you're more concerned about your own issues than being there for family." Reading it made my skin crawl. The self-righteous tone practically oozed from the screen. She had the audacity to call me selfish, to act like I was the one at fault. I could feel my blood pressure rising as I read her words over and over. Losing a loved one? Really? I had lost my mother, and she was still acting like I was supposed to be the one comforting her. Her text felt like a slap, and every word seemed to dig in deeper. She went on, "Dad noticed that you blocked him. He's upset. You should undo that. You can't go through life thinking only about yourself. It's not healthy. I really hope you'll come to your senses and apologize to both of us." I stared at my phone, my breath short and my hands trembling. I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, threatening to burst, but I fought it back. There was no way I'd let her turn this around on me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I wasn't going to let her play the victim. Not again. Slowly, I typed out my reply, every word deliberate, every sentence a release of everything I had been holding in. "Katie, I told our relatives the truth about why you and Dad weren't at the wedding. I'm not a liar, and frankly, you put yourself in that position when you chose not to show up. It's unfair to ask me to cover for you, especially with everything that's happened. Neither of you could be bothered to put me first, just for one day. I have nothing to apologize for. If Dad is upset about being blocked, maybe he should have thought about that before he chose to skip my wedding. You both have hurt me enough. I've made my decision. I don't want any more contact with either of you. Unless it's an emergency, don't bother me. I'm done." I stared at the screen for a moment, my finger hovering over the send button. This was it. This was the final step. But just before I hit send, I thought about Andy. Would he think I was being too harsh? Too cold? No, this was my life, my decision. I pressed send. Katie's response came quickly, too quickly, like she was waiting for me to cave. "Fine," she wrote. "I'll respect your wishes. But just know, Dad's still really upset. And just because you've blocked us doesn't make everything okay. I thought you'd at least understand what it's like to lose someone." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I wasn't going to let it break me. I was done. She could think whatever she wanted, but I wasn't apologizing. I tossed my phone onto the bed, letting out a sigh. I could feel the weight lifting, just a little. Andy and I were about to head off for our honeymoon, something we'd been planning for months. I wasn't going to let them ruin this for me. I deserved this. For once, I wasn't going to feel guilty for choosing me. As I packed my suitcase, a thought flickered in my mind. What would my life look like without them? It felt like an impossible question. But, for the first time, I realized I didn't need them. I had Andy. And that, in the end, was all I needed. The door slammed behind us as we left for our honeymoon, and I couldn't help but smile. This was my future. And it was a future that no one, could take away from me. As we walked away from the house, the weight of the past seemed to fade with every step. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the street, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. There was a small knot in my chest, but it wasn't from guilt or regret. It was the raw ache of what I had left behind. But it was also the quiet relief of knowing that I had chosen to put myself first for once. Andy reached for my hand, squeezing it gently, as if he could feel the shift inside me. I looked up at him, his smile steady and reassuring. We didn't need words, we were in this together. No more expectations, no more manipulation, no more lies. Just us. As the car sped down the road toward our honeymoon, I let out a breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding. This wasn't just a trip. This was the beginning of something new, of a life that was truly mine. And for the first time in years, I wasn't scared. The future felt wide open, full of possibility. I leaned back in the seat, feeling the weight of everything I'd left behind slip away. With Andy by my side, I knew that I could face whatever came next. I wasn't defined by my past anymore. I was finally free. And that, for the first time in my life, felt like everything.